All right. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on what part of the world you are joining us from. I'm Alex Faust, your host of Conversations at the Edge. And today I'm joined by John Wilson, who is one of my favorite thought leaders here at Growth Institute. He's been with us once before, but very excited to have him back in the year 2022. If you're not familiar with John, he is the founder and CEO of the CEO Global Network, which is an exclusive CEO peer group organization. And prior to that, he's built and led successful nine-figure businesses in both Canada and the United States. And he really understands what it takes to lead at the top. And that's why he's so invested in giving back to CEOs. And over the years, John has personally coached hundreds of high-performing CEOs to greater success and is dedicated to fulfilling the mission of the CEO Global Network, which is to significantly improve the success and lives of CEOs and executives, their families, and their companies. He's the author of the acclaimed business book, Great CEOs and How They're Made, which we'll certainly touch on today. And I just want to welcome John back to the community and dive right in to talk about, what it takes to be a great CEO. So John, welcome to Conversations at the Edge. And where are you calling in from today?
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the introduction, Alex. And calling in from Toronto, Canada today, just north of Toronto, and lots of snow outside. So, but it's great to be with you. Great to be with everybody today.
Fantastic. And just a reminder for the folks who are here live, the last 10 minutes will be for you. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat and we'll certainly get to them later on in the call. But I want to jump right in and talk about the role of the CEO. And I personally am not a CEO, but I've read books and I've talked to our clients and coaches such as yourself, and know that the CEO job is very lonely. You're constantly under a microscope. You're being watched by all of your stakeholders. So I want to get a sense from you, John. What do you recommend CEOs should be doing to combat the loneliness and the high pressure job of being a CEO in today's environment?
Well, there's a number of things, Alex, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the job of being the CEO was lonely before COVID, and here we are, 2 years later, and boy, that loneliness has just accelerated tremendously. And so, how do you deal with that? I meet with hundreds of CEOs, and I ask them this question, like, what's keeping you up at night? What is keeping you up at night? And talent is keeping them up at night. The supply chain. I mean, things that you would imagine. The culture. What's happening to the culture of companies these days with working from home, working from a hybrid situation, and what about mental health and also what about technology and where it's going? I mean, those are the big rock things that are on CEOs' minds today. And if you don't have somebody to talk with, if you don't have somebody that you can kind of unload some of the weight on, it can be daunting. And mental health is not just an issue for employees; it can be an issue for people at the top of organizations too. So, what can you do about it? You got to have someone to talk with who understands where you are and what's going on. So having a group of CEOs, having one CEO, having another entrepreneur that you can speak with about the stuff you're wrestling with in a confidential and in a trusting environment is really important during these troubled times, Alex. The other thing too is, for those who are sort of on the call and who maybe don't have a coach or a mentor to talk with, having someone who you can speak with one-on-one in confidentiality, but someone who has the experience of having run a business too is really important. The other thing for people running businesses is having that A team around you at a time like this helps with that loneliness, because if you've got the right level of trust in the room, you can talk openly with them too. So those are a couple of things, Alex, that I think can really help people with the daunting job today during this situation, or at any time. Family is also important. Family is also important here in terms of helping CEOs get through these challenging times. And not that you're maybe going to talk with them about, what's keeping you up at night and supply chain and stuff like that. But just having that rock, just having that with you is extremely important, helping with the loneliness.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about some of the habits, or routines that you've seen successful CEOs kind of create when it comes to family and making sure that rock is not being, left on its own, and we're paying attention to that?
It's huge, isn't it? And this is where, like you go through times in your career where, you're head down and you're sacrificing. I mean, you're making choices all the time. And, I think CEOs are more enlightened today than they were, a couple of decades ago, in terms of really making sure that time and attention is given to the family. Great CEOs, successful CEOs are a success in all dimensions of their life. They're not one dimensional, right? Like they're not workaholics and building a great company and everything else around them is in shambles. And so I really think you just, you spend time with what you value. And, so family is so critical, and you just gotta find a way to spend the quality time with them. And sometimes when I see CEOs who are really burning the candle at both ends, it's because they have not invested in a really good team around them. I mean, if you got a C CFO, and you're having to spend time in that area, you may be spending time doing their job than being with your family, right? And so you got to have really good people around you. That's one of the fundamentals to run a good business, and that'll help you with that work-life balance. But you've just got to hardwire time with the people you love into your life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Growth Institute, we love talking about learning and development, and the idea that leaders are learners. And we can see the bookshelf behind you. You got tons of books. And I'm curious, CEOs need to be learning a lot of things. They need to be learning sales and marketing and finance and technology and operations. But what about the time set aside for how to be a great or a better CEO? What does that kind of learning look like? What do you recommend CEOs do to really dedicate time to being better at the craft of running the ship?
The craft of being a CEO, right? Yeah, absolutely. Well, the best and the brightest are always learning, right? I mean, we talk about being lifelong learners, and certainly the Growth Institute is fabulous for that. But the people who are on this call are learners, right? And so they're always learning. You're always learning. But so you're reading good books, your articles, and every night when your head hits the pillow, you got something that you didn't have when you woke up that morning in terms of how I could be a better leader. But one of the key things, is spending time with peers, with other CEOs, other entrepreneurs who are running businesses, and having a window into other industries through other entrepreneurs, other CEOs, because that's a way you can best practice. You can learn from them. If you're struggling with work-life balance, there's CEOs who have figured that out. Hang with them, right? Learn from them, and so I really think that CEOs need to, again, hardwire into their calendar time to learn, time to come to sessions like this, take the courses that you offer, and just keep continually learning. And I think a good rule, I get asked, by the way, I meet CEOs who say, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. Really? You don't have time for that? How much time do you think a CEO should be spending on getting better, on learning? Well, it's at least a day a month, right? And I mean formal day a month. I'm going to be at this seminar. I'm going to be at this workshop. I'm going to be with this peer group. I'm going to spend time with my business coach, my mentor. Okay. It's all about learning. And so I think it's absolutely critical. The most successful CEOs that I've worked with in my lifetime and that I work with today really take learning seriously. And you never want to be the smartest person in the room, or you're in the wrong room, as they say, right? So you want to be with people that challenge you, take you to your, to an uncomfortable place around learning. And I just think that that's extremely important. One of the dangers that CEOs have, business owners have, is that all your jokes are funny, and all your ideas are good, and that's dangerous, isn't it? That's dangerous. So you want to be with people. You want to learn. You want to be with people that can say, "Hey, that's a dumb idea, and this is why." The other thing is, a lot of people who get promoted to CEO don't know what the CEO job is. They don't know what it is. Like, hey, wait, I was VP of finance, and now I'm the CEO. What do I do? Well, a lot of people tend to go to what they knew, right? And so they'll spend an inordinate amount of time, leading the CFO rather than learning about, as you said, the other dimensions of the role. Well, you've just got to get competent. You got to get competent in the big picture. So those are some of the things, Alex, that I see that CEOs can keep learning.
Yeah, any resources or books or places that you would recommend a new CEO should look to in terms of how do I become a great CEO? I mean, obviously there's your book, but I'm curious.
There's my book. There's Vern's book, or books, right? Absolutely. There's a lot of great books on it. There is a book called I think it's called The First 90 Days. The first 90 days for a CEO are very dangerous days, because most CEOs dive in and want to do too much too soon. The greatest piece of advice for a new CEO is shut up and listen. Like, ask smart questions and listen. In that, but sometimes when you're a new CEO, it's your confidence level is down, perhaps because you're into a whole new environment, and you try to offset that with trying to be the smartest person in the room. It doesn't work. People, you want to connect with people. Business is all about the people. So spending time listening, asking smart questions, being empathetic to them, and trying to understand them and what they're wrestling with is really important for a new CEO. And there's a number of resources you can get. We have, in fact, it's on our website, we have what we call a CEO report card. And for a new CEO, it's a great thing to look at because it basically takes you through all the functions of a CEO, all the stuff that a CEO has to do. And there's probably 10 fundamental things that if you get those 10 things right, you're going to be successful. So yeah, there's resources like that out there.
Can we talk a little bit more about the report card? It was going to be my next question anyway. How to measure the success of the CEO, how you're kind of judging your performance.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of hard data ways to measure your performance, right? There's the financials and market share and all that, but let's go beyond that. As a CEO, and whenever I'm speaking with a CEO, I ask them, what's the number one thing you want to get better at as the CEO? And one of the things I hear more than anything is, I got to learn to work on it more, in it less. On it more, in it less. I also hear, I got to hold people accountable more. I have to have the tough conversation with that toxic employee. I got to do a better job of hiring people. I've been making some mistakes. So that, there's all kinds of things that go into the softer stuff, right? Of determining how good a job you're doing. But I think there's two keys. There's two ways you can measure it, and one of them is Leadership Practices Inventory 360. Do a 360. Do the CEO report card. And how good a job are they doing on marketing? How good a job are they doing on, the leadership team? And do we have a good leadership team? How are we doing on innovation, technology? And how's the CEO doing? And so the magic of that is you give it to your team, you give it to, other people in the organization and say, rate me on a 1 to 10 scale on this stuff and give me some feedback. And the thing that's challenging is, how do you get honest feedback from from a team of people that are reporting to you? And I think, and there are people who disagree with this, but I think until you have a very high level of trust in the room, you got to be anonymous. Like I'm not going to hand this to you. I'm going to send it to a mailbox somewhere, right? And so getting honest feedback is one of the most challenging things for a CEO to get, and that's that you got to find a way to get it. And so you can get it from peers outside your company. You can get it from a mentor coach who cares about you, and they'll give you honest feedback. That's one of the things you get from them. That's the value of it. But 360s and whether it be an emotional intelligence 360, boy, that takes a lot of courage. Emotional intelligence 360, well, they can be done, and I know people have done it. Or a leadership practice 360. And then what you do is you take those on a regular basis. You do them once a year, and you can see how you're moving along. But beyond that, the people around you know, right? As you grow as a CEO, people will know. If you stop growing, they're going to know too, right? If you stop growing, and if you just start going backwards, and if you stop growing, you are going backwards, people will know. So those are a couple of my thoughts on that. But there are some key things that every CEO's got to know and got to do. And I mean, you can grade that. You can grade those things and get that feedback. Get it anonymously. Get it honestly from people that will tell you honestly. The other thing to do is, every time when you're meeting with people, is you just say, look at, what could I be doing to do a better job? And they're going to pull their punch until they really trust you. But at some point they're going to say, you do talk too much in the meetings. You make suggestions before you hear from everybody else, right? By the way, for CEOs, you make a suggestion, it's an order. It's an order. Let's so-and-so, the boss says this. Okay, fine. Suggest this. But anyway, those are find a way to get that honest feedback. There's tools out there that can help you do it. And there's people that can help you do it.
That's great. Thank you. I think this is the only forum in which I don't talk too much. So I want to shift. You mentioned one of the things that is really keeping CEOs up at night is the war on talent today. It's been more challenging than ever, and I'm curious, what is the role of the CEO in terms of recruiting? I'm sure it's different from company to company, but do you believe that there are certain things that have to be done by the CEO to stand out and be attractive to new potential employees?
100%. I really do. I mean, a lot depends on the size of the company, right? But I mean, we're not, you get into multi-billion-dollar companies, it can be a little different that way. Although I think the CEO is still very important in terms of a lightning rod for any employee. Like they look to the CEO, right? What kind of quality are they? One of the thoughts here is that if you want to attract talent to your firm as a CEO, you have to be a high-performing CEO. You've got to be an A player. Most CEOs I know are wrestling with this question, and how do I keep the A players I got, by the way, in this great resignation era? How do I keep my best people? And how do I'm growing the company. How do I attract other high performing people? And well, one way to do that is be high performing yourself. Like no A player is going to work for a B CEO. Well, that's quite an obligation, isn't it? So as the CEO, you've got to keep learning and keep getting better and stay on top of stuff. And People want to work with people that they admire, they respect, and they like. What does that mean? Well, that means that, as a CEO, you better work on the emotional intelligence side of the file too, right? It's not just around the hard stuff, but it's that connection. Self-awareness and empathy are so important for CEOs today because, because of the stress levels that we talk about, right? And so it's just extremely important that the CEO be on top of their game. The other thing that's important is that you've got an A team, that you've got a really good team around, because that will also attract, for sure. The other thing too is we know this, but let me state it. I'm good at stating the obvious. You gotta have a compelling vision. You gotta have the why. Like, what's the why here? Like, it's got to be a higher purpose business. You want to attract talent, you better have a higher purpose business, right? And there's all kinds of them, but as a CEO, you've got to be able to express it. I think as a CEO, you're the top talent. You're the top talent officer. Sooner or later, you're going to meet the people, depending on the size of the company. But you're probably going to be maybe part of the interview process, right? And you've got to really be authentic. You got to come across as someone who really cares about people, and you can't fake that till you make it. You got to care about people, and you're also the person responsible for the culture of the firm. I mean, and it's culture that's going to attract people, isn't it? I mean, that's it. The values of the company. What the values of the company are, quite often they're the values of the owner of the company, or the CEO of the company. So, I think that's extremely important.
Once again,
Yeah.
all eyes and ears are constantly on that CEO position. So
100%. Yeah, 100%. And the other thing too, and then we move on. The other thing too is that the CEO's got to create learning opportunities for the people in the organization. The top people, by that I mean the high performing people in an organization, when the learning stops, the looking starts, right? And they'll take that call from that recruiter. But if they're continuing to learn and be challenged and inspired by what's happening around them in a great culture, that's how you keep people. That's how you attract talent. But it's a big job, but it's a top job for the top person, no question about it.
Thank you. And just a reminder to the folks who are here, if you do have questions, feel free to type them into the chat or the Q&A, and I will move them to the top of the queue. But John, I want to ask, you mentioned mental health a couple times today, and I want to focus on that pandemic, not necessarily the COVID pandemic, but the mental health crisis that we're facing around the world today. And yeah. I think that it's very important for leaders of the organization to address this for their people, so that people are bringing their best selves to work. So I'm curious, what's the role of the CEO in protecting and caring for the mental health of the people on their teams?
This is such an important question, isn't it? I mean, mental health was in crisis before COVID, and now here we are. And the CEO sets the tone. Is this a caring company or not? Do we really care about our people, or are we just saying that in our commercials, right? I mean, do we really walk the talk on that? Are we educating people in our organization on mental health and how to help the person beside us if we see that the person beside us needs help? I mean, there's a ton of education here. One of the things that concerns me a little bit is that I don't think the CEO can delegate this too far. Like, oh wow, we got an HR policy on that, but it's handled. No, it's not handled. I really believe that the CEO has got to be very vocal in this area to make sure that the employees that are under unprecedented stress, and so is the CEO. So we're all in it. But I really think you've got to set up some programs of education. You've got to set up programs that will help people recognize when the person next to them needs some help. And I think the CEO is responsible for that. And then also being understanding when some employees, stumble through these times, and don't work to rule on it. Like, work with people, let them work out of their home a little longer, let them have a longer time off. I just think that we need to ramp up in order to get through this crisis. We just have to ramp up how we help people through these challenging times. And the CEO sets the tone. If they are really understanding and empathetic during that way, then the next level of the organization will be that way, because they'll take his or her lead, and then just cascade that through the organization. And so I think it's absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. I mean, and most CEOs, well, all CEOs that I work with, really genuinely care about the people in their organizations. But we can all be doing more. I really believe we can all be doing more in this area. It's a crisis.
Thank you for that.
Crisis on a crisis.
Yeah. So we do have a question from the audience. Tim is asking, any thoughts on maintaining culture with more hybrid and remote environments moving forward?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I do have thoughts on that, and it's challenging, isn't it? But I really think that's the organization of the future, isn't it? So it's going to be a hybrid, and we've got to figure out a way to onboard people properly, effectively, train people. And I think one of the most challenging things is, how do we keep the company culture? Like, we had a great culture going into COVID. Like, how do we keep it now? We got, people working at home and that type of thing. I think the tools to use is, I think we've just got to ramp up the communication time with each other, and spend more time, like helping people get to know the organization better, helping people get to know each other better, reaching out and having a Zoom coffee with your direct reports on a regular basis. There are some companies that are doing a really good job with this, and I think it does get down to connectivity with the people. You've got people working, in the office tower, and then you've got other people who are working from their homes, they might be on the kitchen table, doing work. I think we can best practice other companies on this, and I think we can set the tone for our own companies by spending more time and setting in some processes on meetings, Alex, where you have meaningful meetings, where people get to know each other and have some fun. I really think you can create a good culture in a hybrid situation. You got to find ways to have fun.
Yeah, I think fun is super important, and Growth Institute has done quite a few things for fun, even in the COVID, environment where we can't necessarily be together. Making sure that we make time for fun is critical.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
So we're almost out of time, but you mentioned meetings, and I want to ask one quick question about meetings before we go. I've heard you say in the past that the number one job of a CEO is to run effective meetings. Can you expand on that and tell us a little bit about your insights there?
Well, and we know about meetings. People hate meetings, and however, people can love meetings if they're well run. Most meetings aren't well run. I read a stat somewhere recently where 50% of the meetings in North America start late. What? They start late. And what does that say? So there are tips and tricks. There are guidelines, rules of engagement, if you will, on how to have effective meetings. And the person that is leading that meeting, and let's say it's the CEO having a meeting with her direct reports and her team, got to be really good at leading that can't come into that meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. I just got off a call. My call went long. Sorry, I'm late. You got 12 people sitting there waiting for the meeting to start. So there's things that have to be done and done well to have effective meetings, and one of them is start and end on time. The other thing is, of course, you got to have an agenda. The other thing is, as the person running the meeting, the quietest person in the room has got to be heard, and the loudest person's got to be kept under control. And then last, Alex, let me just say, at the end of each meeting, you do what I call a plus delta. For every meeting, plus delta. Go around the table. What worked well for you today in this meeting? And what would you like to see us do better next time? Right? And then that way, every meeting you should get better. Okay. So we could talk about that for a long time, Alex, in terms of how to run effective meetings. There's books on it. There's lots of good stuff on the internet on it. And the CEO needs to take time to make sure that the meetings are top notch and people look forward to them. You can do it. It can be done.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for joining Conversations at the Edge today. Thank you to the community who's here watching, listening, participating live. And it's been a real pleasure, and look forward to seeing you all again very soon.
Great being with you, Alex. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, John. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye now.